Well, hello everyone. We're still in Alpharetta this week. We had a good visit with Shannon Pruitt yesterday, also known as Moose. Today we were able to catch up with John Cook of Thomas Concrete. You've probably heard that John has recently retired from Thomas as the leader of their technical services organization. About 100 people, myself included, attended a wonderful retirement party for John just a few weeks ago. Many people spoke at the gathering and they honored John for his expertise, contributions to our industry, and more notably, his trademark, humble character. While I've known John for quite a few years, I don't know his personal story. I know a lot about him, but not all. I'd like to hear more about where he grew up and how he got into the business. John, thank you for taking a little time out of your well-deserved retirement to visit with us. Please tell us your story.
Bill, thanks a lot for having me here and having a little bit of interest of what I can provide for the history of this industry. And thank you very much for showing up to my party the other night. That was quite the ordeal, and I appreciate everybody being involved. But quickly about myself, next month, my wife Janet and I will celebrate our 40th wedding anniversary.
Wow.
So, just very proud of that. Don't know why she stuck with me so long, but glad that she did. I do have a daughter named Abby. She's in the medical field. My son Alex is a mechanical engineer, and my daughter-in-law Ashley, of course, married to Alex. I've also got a brother in the industry, Mike.
Yes, that's right.
He had been involved in the ready-mix side of it for a number of years, and then branched off into the synthetic fiber industry. So he's been dealing with synthetic fibers for a long time.
Well, let me just say quickly.
Yes.
I met Mike probably, 20 years ago, and he introduced me to synthetic fibers. That was my introduction with your brother. And I don't know why I completely forgot about that, but thanks for mentioning Mike.
Different genes somehow. he got the salesman gene, and I had no part of it. So, but no, he does a really good job in the fiber industry. So I'm very proud of him. I was born in Ohio, believe it or not. Didn't live there long. Lived in Pennsylvania for a short time. Actually spent 6 years in New Jersey as a kid. That's that New Jersey accent I've got.
You can't lose it.
And probably. The next 4 years after that, from the time I was 8 till I was 12, we lived in St. Louis, Missouri in a huge apartment townhome complex. So that was very influential in my life. It was so nice to be in a neighborhood with hundreds of kids.
Yes.
Pick up football games, pick up baseball games.
I know.
Fishing on the lake, ice skating. What was neat about that complex was most of the St. Louis Blues hockey players, Jay Randolph, the announcer, a lot of the rookie Cardinals, both baseball and football back then were both St. Louis Cardinals, but a lot of them lived in the neighborhood. So
that's really cool. Yes.
In the winter when the pond would freeze over, we'd be out there playing hockey with professional gear, little kids out there in professional gear playing hockey. So that was kind of neat because they'd bring their practice sticks and whatever and just give it to the kids, the guys from the St. Louis Blues. So that was really neat. So 12 years old, 1972, our family moved to Georgia. Been here ever since. Went to high school at South Gwinnett in Snellville. And that was actually the first school that I went to 2 years in a row.
No kidding.
More than 2 years in a row.
Because of all the moves.
Because of all the moves, and then in that huge complex, if they needed to shift school districts, they shifted that big complex. So I went from being a shy little kid to somebody that could learn how to talk and meet people because of all the different schools I went to. I think that was a big impact on my life, on being able to meet people and talk to people. At high school, I had the option to change again after 2 years, but I had made the varsity baseball team as a sophomore, and they gave me the option to stay at South or go to the new high school, Parkview, that was closer to me. And since Mike was still driving to South. He could drive me to school, so I stayed at South Gwinnett. And again, that was mainly because of my love for baseball back then. And I guess that's about enough.
That's great. That's a really fascinating little story, especially the story with being around those athletes and being in that. I mean, you think about the socialization that you got being, immersed with all those kids.
Oh yeah,
that's
great.
No, that's a great story. Well, now let's get into Ready Mix. Tell us, kind of get us from childhood into the Ready Mix concrete industry or construction materials.
Sure. Well, that's kind of interesting. Also, I went to Georgia Southern again with the intent to play baseball. Didn't realize that the entire infield at that school was all conference infield. Bob Horner was down there.
Oh my!
It was a tremendously good baseball school, and I did not have the tremendous skills to be able to make that team. So they offered me a scholarship at a junior college, and by then I realized baseball was not my future. So I wanted to, at that point, to get an education, and I got my degree in geology. Graduated with a BS degree and had no idea what concrete was, right? So I expected to go out west somewhere to find work in the field of geology, and that was early 80s. Mm-hmm. So the work, the economy was terrible.
Right.
There were no jobs available. It was bad, and believe it or not, back then we looked at want ads in newspapers to find a job. I know it's different for some of the young people these days, but I saw an ad in the Atlanta Journal, a want ad looking for a geologist. So I said, wow, maybe here's a chance for me to stay here local and get a job. So I went to the interview along with 200 other people, 200 other degree geologists.
Yes.
And there were 6 of us hired, and come to find out it was a geotechnical firm, which is what we know as a testing lab.
Yes.
Testing soils and testing concrete for construction projects going on, which is kind of interesting if you think of now some of the technicians you run across in the field for testing labs, and knowing that a geology degree was required to have that position, you might be a little surprised there. The story behind that was the gentleman that was doing the hiring was a geologist and realized all the different science classes and what it went into getting that degree, and that was the type of person he wanted. You didn't need the degree to do the job. He just had the luxury of putting those requirements there.
That's interesting. Very interesting. But it makes sense. It makes perfect sense.
That science background, all the science classes we had to take. Moving on from there, I worked there for a year when Marshall Williams from Williams Brothers Concrete and Stan Jaglinski, who was heading the technical side over there under Marshall, invited me out to dinner and offered me a job. Their technicians had interacted with me on some jobs where I was doing the testing for ATEC, and thought that maybe I would be helpful for Williams Brothers to come to work for them. I didn't want to get any further away from my degree than I already was.
Yes.
So I stayed for another year, and Marshall and Stan both came back again after
the
second year. I was working on the Circle 75 project right there by the Atlanta Braves, ballpark. And Rick Breedlove was the superintendent. But anyway, they came back a second time, and at that point I saw I was going nowhere with my geology.
Right.
So I went on to work for Williams Brothers, and I've got to say the team over there at Williams Brothers, the technical team back then, was amazing. Some names you'll recognize. You and I discussed Tony
Cantrell, yes.
While ago. So Tony was there, starting up the admixture side. Tom Wagispack, who went with Tony to basic, he was over there. Michael Robinson, I don't know if you know Michael, he's with Carolina State Light now.
Yes.
But he was in their lab back then, and later went to Carolina State Light. And Michael was a huge resource to me when I got, after the first couple of weeks over there, they assigned me plants and I was on my own. But the great part about that was I had those resources. I could be on a job site, excuse myself, or tell them I need to go back to the plant to research records, and I could call Michael on the phone and really get the help I needed to get me through situations. And also we had Nick Maloof, who's been a huge
I remember Nick
on my career. He was there, so he was another great resource. Vernon Chambers, Scott Godfrey, David Parham, a lot of names that people listening to this podcast may recognize. So it was quite the team back then.
Yes.
Williams Brothers was the player in town for ready mix, and the quality side was, second to none, of course.
Let me ask you real quick,
Sure.
pause you real quick. Roughly, I don't know why I'm interested in timelines, but roughly what year was that when you went to the?
So that would have been 82. No, that would have 82 to 84. I was at ATEC. 84 to 86. I was with Williams.
Gotcha. Okay.
So what's interesting about what happened at Williams Brothers and why I left in 86. So in that 85, 86 period is when Blue Circle bought Williams Brothers. And, again, we're here to talk about history, right?
Yes,
so
absolutely.
There. So what I find really interesting there is Rudy Bowen, Millard Bowen, Woody Bowen.
Yes.
Were huge in the residential development, building houses, building subdivisions, developing properties. They were cousins to the Williams Brothers.
See, I didn't know that. If I did, I forgot that. That's a good point.
So it was always interesting. They said, well, all the concrete we need, we'll just buy from our cousins. No big deal.
Right.
Well, when the Brits bought them out, when Blue Circle bought them out, they said, the heck with this. I'm not going to buy from any foreigners. I'm going to start my own concrete company.
Yes.
So they started Bowen Concrete. They hired Johnny Center to run it. And Johnny hired Duncan Bailey to run the sales, Joe Dickinson to run the operations, and asked me to start up the quality side for Bowen Concrete.
And that was in 86?
That was in 86. I went over there in June of 1986. A little while after I left, Nick had left Williams Brothers, or Blue Circle at the time. I guess he stayed after I left, but he left after it was Blue Circle and went to work for Ben Hill Concrete.
Okay.
So within a couple of years of those changes, Thomas Concrete from Sweden, Thomas Concrete bought Ben Hill and
that's right.
And Bowen.
This is helpful, very, very helpful.
And brought us together, and they put the name Ben Hill Bowen because everybody recognized those names locally. They didn't recognize the Thomas name. So for a period of time, we were Ben Hill Bowen. And it was interesting for Nick and I, because Nick was over quality for Ben Hill, I was over quality for Bowen, brought us together. And of course, Nick had the seniority, a lot more years in the industry. So they gave Nick the title of Director of Tech Services and me the title of Field Director.
Yes.
So I was responsible for the technicians and making sure the right things were being covered out in the field. But it was great to be back working with Nick again. After a few years, Nick actually left the department and started up our Thomas Academy and got the ISO 9000 work started.
See, I did not know this piece of the story. This is interesting.
Thank you.
We're here today. That's why we're here. Did not know about Thomas Academy.
Yeah, so Nick started up Thomas Academy and got the ball rolling and did all the legwork for the getting us ISO 9000 certified, which left the technical services department back in my hands again, which it stayed until last week, and of course Justin took it over.
Yes.
But some interesting things there with the changes, why Bowen started up and how that started. And for people listening to the podcast that don't know, Williams Brothers, of course, was the big player back then in the late 70s, early 80s. Bought out by Blue Circle, by Blue Circle in 85, 86. And Then they were bought out by Lafarge, who later was bought out by Argos.
Yes.
So people that see the Argos
Yes.
trucks on the road now, that originated with the Williams Brothers Company way back then. And then, of course, there's been a couple more changes with Summit and Quikrete from the Argos.
Yes.
Since then. But that's the history. It goes all the way back to that big Williams Brothers Company.
Yes.
Way back then, all those changes.
And you know, I did. Of course, I had the opportunity to interview Tim Christian.
Yeah.
And Tim provided some of that early Williams Brothers history. And if I remember right, he said at the peak there were 49 concrete plants. And how many salesmen did he tell me? 90 to 100 salesmen. Anyway, it was a foundational operation here.
Yeah, I don't remember, of course, the number of salesmen. What I remember is we were doing, I want to say $3.6 million
Yes.
a year. And the plants that I got assigned as a technician did 45% of that business.
That is unbelievable.
I had 10 plants. The Dorville plant back then had just been built. It was the state-of-the-art plant. But so 45% of that business, and here I am, a technician. And the reason I bring this up is because back then, each salesman for each plant would initiate a complaint report if there was any kind of issues with his finishers or low brakes or this, that, or the other. And he'd leave that complaint report in the office there at the plant. So I'd start my day every day with a stack of complaints, 1.5 to 2 inches thick, that I'd go to investigate and try to find resolution to. And after busting my butt for 14 hours a day or whatever, I'd end the day with the same stack.
With another, yes.
Different complaint forms, but the stack was still the same.
Yes.
So I spent, a couple of years putting out fires and never really being able to prevent a lot of problems. And when I was asked to go to Bowen, it was, a breath of fresh air. I was in the sand plants. I was in the rock quarries. I was at the raw material sources. I was on my hands and knees with the finisher. How's this working for you? And all that. So really getting to the root of the problem and being able to prevent problems rather than react to problems. So kudos to Johnny Center and the Bowens for recognizing the value of hiring a quality department, even though we were a 1-plant, 6-truck operation at that time. But I think Thomas still sees benefits from that today, from being able to be proactive instead of reactive.
No doubt. And you and I were talking before we got started about that theme, about how to get in front of these problems, because sometimes it could be some simple conversation with the finisher before a pour. It could be in the pre-pour. It could be, but to your point, but I think it sounds like all that time in the firefighting mode, I guess on one hand, there was a lot of pain there that you said, I don't have to fight these again. So you get so creative. But no, that's a great story. Well, let me ask you this. What, over your career in this industry, when you think about enjoyment and pleasure from a work standpoint, what comes to mind? What over those years really was gratifying to you? What about the business was gratifying and enjoyable?
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is the people.
Yes.
There's so many good people in this industry. I don't care if it's customers, engineers, co-workers, competitors. I mean, anywhere you look, there's so many good people in this industry, and the relationships and business relationships, friendships that I've built over those years. That's been the most enjoyable part. That and being able to share knowledge and help others grow in their roles. Those are the two most enjoyable things that I can say for my time in the industry.
And I completely get it, and I know what you're saying. And I've often wondered, why is the industry that way? And I guess one thing that I think about as you were talking is that we're so interdependent. And if you get into a war or a battle, whether it's with the stone supplier or cement, I mean, if you it goes nowhere. I mean, you end up in. So it's like for us to thrive together, we have to forge these relationships.
Yes.
And so there's a desire, I think, in general, like you say. I mean, there's something about it. It's so special that the friendships that come out of the work that we do. No, that's really good. That's let me ask you about. So was it 38 years? Is that, or how many years total?
So with Thomas, 38 years.
38.
June would have been 39, and then the 2 years with Williams Brothers and the 2 years with the testing lab. So a little over 40 years, 42, 43 years in the industry.
Right. So what comes to mind in terms of really landmark changes in our industry, the really notable, I don't want to use the term paradigm shift, but we use that word, overuse it, but you get the idea. In other words, over that time, as it relates to concrete, what were the breakthroughs along the way, or the big leaps forward technically, or what have you? But you know what I mean.
Oh yeah, I think the obvious thing that comes to my mind is the admixture technology.
Right.
We can remember the days where we had a high range water reducer or super plasticizer in tanks on the side of a truck, like a fuel tank, because it would have to be added on the job to increase the slump, but it only had about 30-minute slump life before you lost it. And the strength values weren't that great. I can remember the days when 8,000 PSI concrete was extremely hard to attain. And nowadays, with the new polycarboxylate high-range superplasticizer technology, and the efforts that went with that to train people and our work on mixed designs, etc., 8,000 is everyday concrete. I mean, you don't even think about making 8,000, and we can make 20,000 plus.
Unbelievable.
Concrete.
It's
not
unbelievable.
that it's specified in this market. I mean,
No,
it's not
right.
for some of the other issues, with testing, etc. But yeah, that admixture technology, I think, is probably the biggest change, to be able to now comfortably produce 8, 10, 12,000 PSI concrete every day, where we used to really, we're going to pour 8,000, we may be tearing it out tomorrow. That kind of change, I think admix was a big part of it.
And I've never thought about it quite like what you just said, but when you consider that we fundamentally sell compressive strength, so if you dramatically enhance that ability, it's huge.
Exactly.
And so thank you for pointing that out. I mean, I came in 02, 03, at the end of 02, which those polycarboxylates, I think, were just starting maybe on the scene.
Yeah, probably.
And so I have a little sense of what you're talking about. So that's a great illustration. Let's talk about now and today. In terms of, again, we'll concentrate more like on the product, since that's where your focus has been on ready-mix concrete. Challenges that we face today, and one way I think about this is something, if it were solved, would be just a breakthrough for us today in our industry. Does anything come to mind that you know what I'm saying? Something that we're struggling with today with our product that could use a breakthrough, I guess, if you will.
No question, and you know me well enough to know what my answer is going to be already. But it's the proper representation of our product. Like you said, we do so. We sell compressive strength, and unfortunately, our product is not well represented when it's tested in place. Whether it's the testing method or the people or all the things that affect a small specimen and the testing of our product, somehow we've got to figure that out. And another challenge in today's world is sustainability. Everybody's working to low carbon concrete, low carbon impacts, and sustainable products. And when you look at the testing, it's so related to the sustainability, because as a ready-mix producer, we have to protect our company's name and protect from liability of having low strengths. So we inherently over-design our mixes to try to overcome what we perceive as how it's going to be tested and what those results are going to be, and try to protect ourselves from those low breaks, which leads to more cement in the mix, which totally works against
the sustainability
part of it. So to me, that's the biggest challenge. If we could find an answer to that, whether that's in maturity testing or somehow improving the test methods or testing of the product, but somehow that really needs to be addressed.
That is
and we've been working on it forever.
I went back, when I came back 3 years ago, and I found some old files from the technical committee. I'm trying to think, they were at the GRMCA office, and I was just, looking through those old file folders, and I think it was from the 70s or the 80s, and it's technical committee meeting, and you could look through all the committee notes over the last 30 years, and it's there in every one of them. How do we get our...
So you can look back and find, I don't remember what the year was, but when I was chair of the technical committee the first time, we recognized the problem we were having, the conflict between the testing lab and the ready mix producer. So we created what we called a forum. I don't remember exactly whether it was testing lab producer forum or whatever, but we brought all the labs we could find in town, all the producers we could find in town, brought them together just kind of with a whiteboard. What problems are we causing you? What problems are you causing us? Back and forth, trying to work together to help solve those. And what we quickly realized was we needed the contractor involved too. The contractor had such a big input on what the testing lab could do on a job, what the producer could do, back and forth. So for all of us to work together, we needed the contractors also. So we went to their association and brought them in. And what came out of it was our original GCMPA, Georgia Concrete and Products, which turned into GRMCA. We came out with a pre-construction checklist.
Yes.
And that came out of that forum way back then, whatever year that was. And again, we started working on that long ago, and here we're still issues. So that's where the frustration comes in.
Well, I think we've mustered an even greater resolve, maybe. Well, you know what? Honestly, I think here's what's unique today, and you totally said it. This sustainability drive, this push. And so now maybe we've got this opportunity, to leverage that, because if the owners and the contractors or architects, they're saying we've got to have these GWPs, global warming potential numbers, they got to come down. So, okay, here's how, the only way we're going to go any further. So maybe that'll, you know what I mean? Maybe it's kind of a leverage point that maybe now we can. But that's excellent, and I'm glad you shared that. Changing gears a little bit more on the human side, personal side, and you've already kind of answered this a bit, but I'm always curious to hear some of the more influential people in your life, especially as it relates to your style of leadership in your business life. In other words, there are people that certainly gave you technical, coaching and counsel, which is wonderful to have those kind of resources. Nick Maloof and some of the other names that you mentioned. But it's in particular to kind of more the leadership side and kind of how you work with people, how you led, and how, you ran a big organization. Who would you say were some who kind of got into your mind and heart to help shape you, and in what ways do you think that it really mattered?
Well, I don't mind running my mouth, and I think the answer to this question is going to be a bigger answer than you were really looking for, because it's more about the people that influenced my life than it is about me. But yeah, I've got to start with my parents. My parents were very influential on the work ethic. And the importance of education. My mom was an educator, and my dad was an organic chemist. So education was very important to them, and they made sure that Mike and I took it seriously. But the work ethic part, I think, was bigger. The next part of that would be my family. Having my wife and my two children, giving me the drive to be successful, to support them and do what they needed, to be around for that. So that was a great influence. The next thing with the leadership roles would have to be, I've got so many thanks and reasons for my career to go to the two CEOs really that I worked for at Bowen and Thomas Concrete, and that would be Johnny Center in the early days and Alan Wessel in the later days. I mean, two fantastic gentlemen that two totally different styles of how they went about things, but both of them, of course, very impactful and very successful, and a lot of impact on my career. And
well, let me, if I could, let me probe just a little bit, if I could, without going, real deep. But is there a particular characteristic of Johnny, and then likewise with Alan, something in particular that about their style or their skill that you saw and observed and took to heart, and then as you said, influenced you? Could you anything come to mind?
Yeah, I think with Johnny, Johnny had some Horace Williams in him. So with Johnny, it was more of the work ethic, really putting the time in and have that time be productive time. So, which I was all about. It was fine with me. I didn't mind working hard, and everybody around me was working hard. So it worked out very well. But I think from the Johnny side of it, it was being very productive, working hard, giving it your all. And then from the Allen side, it was probably more of diving in deeper to finding root causes, finding reasons, for doing things and looking at results and things like that. So really dialing in on those things. I think that's the difference between those two and the impacts they had on me.
That's really helpful, and I get it. Those are good, because I didn't know. I know Alan much better than I knew Johnny. In fact, Johnny was really an acquaintance. I interacted with him a little bit at a few meetings here and there. Something that I'm trying to remember, may have been an association thing, but I didn't know him.
Right.
So that's helpful.
Before we get off of the impact,
please.
I really want to get some names and professions on the line here as far as influence to the industry and of course myself. And I really think it's almost unsung heroes, and that's the vendors.
Yes.
I mean, look at GRMCA. We're a ready mix association, but how important are the vendors to the association? Well, in my career, I mean, it was huge. When I came over as a kid, I was 26 years old when Johnny asked me to start up the quality side for Bowen Concrete, so I was just a kid. When you had gentlemen from the cement industry like Deke Baggett, Billy Meacham, and people from the aggregate side like Kelly Fikes with Vulcan back then, I mean, those guys took me under their wing. Dan Brown was involved. So those guys took me under their wing and really helped me along. And then Don Dixon worked for Testing Lab back then, and he really introduced me to ACI and got me involved in ACI. So it was a lot of influence from the guys outside of the ready mix industry. And then, mid-career, it was a lot of the admix guys like Turkey.
Yes.
Nobody knows his real name, Lamar Cantrell. But Turkey with Euclid was a huge influence. And Curtis Gould started with admix and then into the fly ash side. Really involved in helping us learn their products and learn different technologies. So they were a huge help. And then as you get more current, Wayne Wilson has been a big part of my career from day one. We actually worked at ATEC together back, before I ever went to Williams Brothers.
Real quick comment. You say Wayne. So when I first came here, and we're actually, by the way, folks, we're sitting in my old conference room, my old Fulton Concrete conference room, which is Thomas's customer care center. But Wayne, I think, was the first technical, cement technical person. He was Wholesim then, and we were using Wholesim, and so he was a great teacher because I knew nothing. And so Wayne was my first encounter. To your point, yes, they played a huge role. But keep going.
And then currently, I mean, you have people like Paul Ramsberg with Sika and Terry Harris.
Yes.
With Creso. I mean, just gentlemen that have really influenced my career and helped and been a resource, for my career. So I just want to make sure. Not many people talk about the vendor side of it when they're talking about things like this, but they have had a huge impact on my career and for the association, of course.
Well, and just to say real quickly, most people listening probably know this, but on our board of directors, certainly today, but I know going back in time, we've always, had a nice blend of, aggregates and cement and admix, along with our, of course, our producers. But we, to your point, we want them involved in helping us steer the industry.
No doubt. So
thanks for pointing that out. It's a good lead in to the association. I always like to hear on this one, but you've been involved in it for many years, the GRMCA or GCMPA. But as you pointed out, you were a technical committee leader maybe several times. But say a little bit about, as specifically as you can, the benefits that you see. What value does the association bring to our industry? How do we help the industry? How do we help its members? But what would you say about that?
It goes back to the same answer I've had several times today, and that goes back to the people. To be able to network with the different people in the industry, and through the association, whether it's committees or other association work, to have the good heads of the different people being able to share information, the proper information, but the information that helps the individual, helps the companies, and helps the industry and the association. I mean, the teamwork of getting those groups of people, the diverse people together, and pushing the right things forward for the industry and the companies. I think it's all about the people.
It really is. And as we've said repeatedly, as we've talked in this time together, there's so many interdependencies, making our product, delivering our product. There's so many moving parts. And I've often thought about it, and I've shared this with others, early on when I came into this industry, for some reason, the picture of if you've ever seen it, that three-dimensional, like a three-dimensional chess game. If you remember those, it's like glass chessboards, and they're three high, and you're playing chess on three different levels. And to me, it's like you've got cement, aggregate. You could say four, or you could even go beyond that. But my point is, you've got aggregates, which are crucial. You've got Portland cement, which is crucial. You've got admixes, which is even more and more crucial. And then our other vendors, our mixer. So there are all of these moving parts that need to be in concert.
Exactly.
To have a really great experience and to deliver that compressive strength.
Yeah. So the association allows that to happen, brings those people together, and helps focus, the efforts in the right direction to improve the whole industry. So that's where the association, by bringing that together and helping facilitate that.
Very good, very good. Thank you. One last question. You've been retired how long now? 1 week?
1 week tomorrow.
1 week tomorrow. So what advice for newcomers, not necessarily young people per se, but newcomers to our industry coming into, to work in the ready-mix concrete industry, what key advice would you offer them in order to help them be as successful as they can be? What would you say?
Use the resources around you. I mean, if I think about our technical team at Thomas, when we bring in a new technician, I mean, that's the first thing I point out. We have so many knowledgeable people on the technical team, great technical team, and for them to listen, ask questions, pay attention, be involved with these people and learn from them. And don't be scared to, if you're out and about and in a situation, don't be afraid to reach out. And again, not only to our technical team, but you have great people in production and sales and the vendors and all that. So it's really use the resources, meaning use the people and their knowledge, and try to gather that knowledge from the people you're around and the situations you're in. That, to me, that's
a big deal, isn't it?
Yep.
And would you agree with me that in our industry, it may not be true in others, but certainly in ours, people aren't stingy with their knowledge. They really do seem like most people you interact with are eager to help.
There's a few still out there afraid to share knowledge, thinking that they may be able to take their job.
Right.
There's a few of those, but that's very rare. This industry, like you said, seems so prolific in people that are willing to share and want others to learn and grow. So that's been a very good part of this industry. Yep.
Well, John, it's been so good to visit with you. The party the other night was wonderful. It was such a good turnout, such good fun to see. I saw many people there I hadn't seen. I hadn't seen Turkey. Turkey was he worked. He was my first field tech guy with Euclid, I guess, at the time. But it was good to see him the other night and see others for sure. And so I'm grateful for your friendship. I'm grateful for you taking some time out of retirement life, and I hope to continue to enjoy the friendship. And certainly we wish you well, my friend. We really do. So,
thanks for everything. Thanks for showing up the other night, and thank you for the friendship, and it will continue. Thank you very much.
Take care.